You're listening to the Family Discipleship Podcast.
Welcome to the Family Discipleship Podcast. We're here to equip and encourage Christian parents to lead their families, and we're now posting every other Monday all year long. This is Adam Griffin, and I'm here with my co-host, Mrs. Cassie Bryant. Cassie, how are you?
I'm great. Glad to be here. Excited to be with you.
Yeah,
missing our Chelsea.
Sadly, Chelsea
is
not
third wheel, but I'm more the third wheel. But I'm missing her. You know, we're better.
You're the third wheel.
We're better when she's with us.
Third wheel on a four-wheel car. You know, the Lord.
There you go.
Me,
yeah,
Chelsea. Yeah, Cassie. We're gonna talk today about storytelling a little bit.
Yeah.
What are some of the favorite stories of yours from when you were growing up? Do you remember reading something? Do you remember a movie? Were you a never-ending story watcher? What was your favorite story growing up?
I mean, I love all the Kate DiCamillo books. So Because When Dixie, Tale of Despereaux, I kind of grew up on some of those stories. And then Narnia as an adult. So I didn't really come into the Narnia world until college. Also Harry Potter, big Harry Potter fan. Sorry for people.
I thought you were a Christian.
I know.
What's the deal?
I am.
Oh, man.
Grace abounds.
Okay, Cassie, if you had to rank them, Lord of the Rings, Star Wars, superheroes, Narnia, or Harry Potter, is there one that comes out a clear winner?
I think Narnia.
Really?
Lord of the Rings loses me a little. Eric read all of them to the girls out loud, and his Tom Bombadil voice is like so great. They're just a little too much for me.
Too much.
But I love
fantasy.
Narnia. Love Narnia.
Okay.
Star Wars. We love Mandalorian. This is the way. I quote that all the time. This is the way. Yeah. I have spoken.
Yeah.
I use Mandalorian words all the time.
That's awesome.
Superheroes are fine. It's fine.
So you're fine. You're not against
into
them.
it.
Yeah, I was big Lord of the Rings growing up. I'll be honest. I never really got into Narnia. I know that makes me not a Christian, but I'm fine with The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. The rest of them, I really
We're gonna both get
did
some
not
comments
enjoy.
on this. I can tell.
Yeah, you know what? That's fine.
It's okay. It's fine.
That's fine. It's a preferencing. I'm not saying I'm against Narnia. I'm certainly not against the Lord. I read the Bible a lot growing up, and still do. Still into it. But hey, speaking of storytelling, Cassie, we have such a great guest with us today.
Can't wait.
Our listeners know him as S.D. Smith. Today we'll be calling him Sam. Guys, this is the author of the Green Ember series. Sam, how are you doing today?
I am outraged at your conversation so far. I'm just starting off with seething anger.
Oh, no. What did we get wrong?
Was it
Fix
Harry
us.
Potter? Was it?
No. I mean, one of you wasn't. You weren't up on or big on the Lord of the Rings, and one of you is not big on Narnia. So I think I'm afraid you're both going to have to be excommunicated. I'm so sorry.
But together,
this is a very short episode.
Together, you make one really great person. Honestly,
one great opinion.
I was so excited, Cassie, about hearing your husband's. I'm like dying to hear the Tom Bombadil voice now.
I'll see if I can send it your way.
I think Cassie should give us a little.
Yeah, could you do one?
No, I'm so bad because he sings it. He's like singing and, such a whimsical character. But yeah, his Star Wars characters were all very well voiced as well. His Chewbacca.
Wow.
His Darth Vader. Yeah.
Sounds like an ideal man situation.
He might have missed
here.
his calling as a voice actor. But
that would be a sweet job, honestly.
I
have been actually thinking about Tom Bombadil lately. This is weird, but I've been thinking I need to channel a little bit more Tom Bombadil. He was unflappable no matter how hard things got. True. Just constant joy and never afraid. And I was like, man, I could use a little Tom Bombadil in my life.
I'd love to see you in some yellow boots too.
Yeah.
I think that
yellow
would be,
boots, a bigger beard.
And his boots are yellow. I mean, he's a merry fellow, and I think that we could all
and singing pretty much everything.
Yeah.
I'd love that. Sam, it sounds like you were into Narnia. It sounds like you were into Lord of the Rings. Were those inspirations at all when you were sitting down to write?
I don't know. I mean, kind of. I was a late reader, so I came to all those things. Well, my mom read Narnia when we were little, so I didn't read those individually. I didn't read anything individually till I was probably 15 or 16, which is very rare for authors, so I got a late start, but I loved the Narnia books. It was just transformational in my mind. It was just absolutely incredible. I could tell it was different than sort of everything else, but I didn't know why. I couldn't put words to it, but I was just seeing things. It was a massive and I had kind of a big imagination, but I grew up in the 80s. It was Star Wars and Indiana Jones and that sort of stuff. But Narnia was just so special. And then, so I came to Lord of the Rings like in my teens and read those. And so they're like, there's no intentional imitation or anything like that, but it's like the ground that I was, that I grew in. So I don't know. It's impossible not to sort of be influenced by those absolute masters. And I'd say more of my stories, maybe the Robin Hood stories were maybe a little more of more of an influence. I would say not even direct, but just that's sort of the tone of the Green Ember more. That it's not like the Lord of the Rings exactly.
But you were tempted to put in a Tom Bombadil rabbit at some point?
Well, I mean, yeah.
Maybe it's coming. I
didn't think I don't think about doing direct look, but there's some goofy wise people or rabbits in the Green Ember, so maybe there would be.
And we should say too, the Green Ember is not the only series you've written. We could talk about Mooses with Bazookas, The Found Boys, and you have The Story Warren, which is a bigger thing we can let you talk about here in a second. You talk about being allies in imagination. But before we get to all that stuff, you mentioned how your mom read to you these stories growing up. I know a part of your story with even the things that you've published is telling stories to your kids. So could you maybe give us a little window into this? Was your mom telling you stories, reading to you at Narnia? Was that part of just your education process growing up, or was that a discipleship? Would you say this was my mom inviting us into the narrative, or was it just entertainment? What role did story maybe play for you as a kid, and then how did you want that to go for you as a parent?
Well, I look forward to this 3-hour answer. It's going to be fantastic. I hope someone's taking notes so it can just be my autobiography. So we were as far back as I can remember, we were preparing for the mission field. My parents were late to that. They were, I think, in their 40s when we went to South Africa. I was 12 years old when we went to South Africa. So we were very much in our own culture in West Virginia, in the Huntington, West Virginia area. And so I lived back in the woods, and we lived for most of my early childhood in the basement of a log cabin that my dad was building that we never finished because we went to the mission field. So I lived in a basement. So I can remember in that sort of dark, sometimes damp basement, in a holler, the sort of the little valley between mountains, which is they're all over West Virginia.
Yeah,
that was sort of the canvas of my childhood. And I remember being in that place, and we would travel. And I remember being in there and just listening to her read us the Chronicles of Narnia. I would say for her it was more maybe. I think she was just thinking about discipleship. She was thinking about spiritual formation because it was the Bible and memorizing parts of Scripture and that kind of thing. She was pretty serious about that. When we were growing up, they were really devout Christians, and I'd say faithful, and they were preparing to go to a mission field. And so they were unusual, I would say. And it's almost more common now to see some of the things that they were doing at the time are more ordinary or regular, but they were really out of step in a lot of cool ways, I think, with their own culture, and at the same time being very much sort of rooted in like where we live in a place and a people. But yeah, she would read those, and so when we were on trips, she would read other books to us too, and there were a lot of more like Christian books, kind of like God's Smuggler. I don't know if you ever heard that book, Brother Andrew. It was a guy that smuggled Bibles into Eastern Europe, and it was a really fascinating book. That one really stood out to me. But I had people that would read books. A teacher, Miss Geiner, who read just Little Women and The Boxcar Children, and so those sorts of experiences were. I didn't know it then. I didn't know any boys that read books. We all just played sports and went out in the woods and stuff. So I knew some girls that would read, but not very. A couple of boys would read. They were like drawing dragons over in the corner at school. There was kind of, that wasn't my world, even though I kind of was like interested in those guys. Like I was kind of like those guys, but I was more of like the basketball, soccer kind of a guy. But yeah, Mom was a huge, huge influence on me. I would say mostly spiritually. And that was the big focus. It was the Bible, and at that time it was like sword drills and that sort of stuff. Like and she was kind of giving us something that I didn't know at the time so much, but it was kind of rare. It was really special, which has definitely transferred over into my own life. My oldest brother would tell me stories, made up stories about animals that we knew. There was a pony called Sparky, and a little dog, and so there was these pony and dog stories, these personified sort of animal stories that he would tell me. So I loved that so much. So my baby sister, when she came along, she was the last. There's 4 boys and a girl. And she was my own special little person, and I just took care of her all the time, and I just really love her. And it's funny because she lives about 80 yards across the way, and her husband is the publisher of the Green Ember and all my books, or almost all my books. But she was so special to me, and I used to tell her stories. I used to tell her little stories, and so it was really natural for me when we had a family that I would just tell stories to them, and it was just this sort of slow evolution, development of a storyteller for me. I didn't know what I was doing when I was a kid, and I was in the woods making up endless stories and playing with whatever we had. We weren't poor, but we didn't have all the G.I. Joes or all the Star Wars or all the guns or all the things we wanted. But my dad would cut out of wood. He would cut out like an M16, and we were playing army out in the woods and playing space stuff out. So I was just doing it all the time and making up my own adventures and serial adventures if I was ever alone, which would happen a fair amount. I played with my brothers all the time and my baby sister when she came along, but it was just, I was world building like crazy. I didn't know it. I had no idea. But I was always making up little stories with characters and leaving little groups. And so much of that prepared me. I think boredom is so profoundly important for all of us.
That's a good word.
But for so-called creative people, it's really, really powerful to, and it's almost impossible to find now. But I had it in, bushels as a child, and it was huge for me.
So what does that look like when you're talking about with your own kids? Are you sitting down and you're telling them a story and you're saying, Dad's going to pick up where we left off tomorrow? Is it you making it up as you go along and kind of just bringing it to a conclusion each night? Are your kids passive listeners? Do you involve them in it? Just give me a picture of what the Smith house looks like when you're sitting down to tell your kids a story.
Well, I mean, I'm in a different place now. My kids are mostly adults or almost adults. So, yeah. But when they were younger and little, I mean, the Green Ember, for instance, started with my oldest daughter, Anne, who's 23 now. She was just a little toddler. We're on the porch. I used to tell her a bunch of different kinds of stories. So I told her a story about a little dog named Chance, and I told her a story called The Girl with Golden Wings, and I told her a bunch of different little, and they would always be just, I didn't keep super close track, but we kind of remember where we were. We leave, it was like the serial adventures.
That's awesome.
And there was always kind of they were going towards something, and sometimes I knew what that was, and sometimes I would figure it out along the way, or figure it out as we got close to, the climax or the end of the story. But one day it was kind of story time around the porch, and there were rabbits hopping around. We live in the country in West Virginia, in a rural part of West Virginia, which is to say any part of West Virginia. But we live in the Appalachian coal fields, and there's a lot of rabbits out here. And I'm right now, I'm about, speaking of 80 yards, I'm probably about 80 yards from the porch where the Green Ember started. But there were rabbits in the yard, and I just started telling her a story about an older sister rabbit and a younger brother rabbit, and she loved it. And so, yeah, we kind of picked up the next time, and it sort of became the main focus. Her little brother joined in, and we were on walks and bedtimes and all around. Sort of, when it was story time, I would spend time sharing that with them. And it's funny because you guys, are obviously keen on family discipleship, but it's funny that wasn't to the exclusion of sort of the Bible or Christian instruction. It was kind of hand in hand in a way. It was its own thing. That wasn't like a time to now I'm going to teach you a lesson and I will do it in story form. That was mostly delight. But we went through the Pentateuch, we went through the Gospels, we went through so much of the Bible. And I mean, there was a step in our house that Gina, my wife, painted the walls chalk, like the black sort of stuff. And then we had, we would draw a picture of different sort of scenes, like the plagues and different moments, because particularly the Pentateuch really stuck with us. And we just had it everywhere. We had Abraham and we had Moses. We had all these characters sort of in this continuing kind of a thing. So it was funny that they came. I think some people are like, well, what are you doing with the Green Ember? Are you trying to preach the gospel and trying to share salvation? And I'm like, that couldn't be more important to me, but sort of no, that's not what I'm doing here. But there's so much, and the Green Ember wouldn't be possible without the Old Testament, the New Testament, in my heart and in my blood, more so than Tolkien or Lewis. Anyway, that was a little glimpse into sort of what their life was like as they grew up. And different books, like The Found Boys was a story I told Nora, my youngest, who's now 14. The book I'm writing right now, the series I'm writing right now, Little Trilogy, is a kind of a unicorn story, is a story that I told my daughter, Nora. So that it's sort of been along the way, but it's a little bit less so now as far as like I'm not telling them bedtime stories. And we're not doing as much read aloud of that kind of stuff, but it did all sort of like, it all comes from that sort of same spring.
Yeah. Well, I know Cassie's going to ask you some questions here. Maybe that'll get us more into one of those series. I get really like my temptation is I have so many questions about the story writing and the story process and how fun it must be to involve your kids in that and how much ownership they must have in the characters as you're coming up with ideas. And I want to talk more about, because you have gotten to write with your son formally a little bit too. So I want to talk more about that here in a second. But I also have, this is a weird quirk of mine. I love when somebody helps explain the space that they create where they're creative. You have this place you call the Forge, the shed, where you do some of your writing, not all of your writing. Are you there right now? I don't know if you're there right now.
I'm there.
Okay.
That's you can hear my little air conditioner mini split going. I was assured that it could be taken away by the magic of technology, but yes, I'm in the garden shed now.
What do you like to surround yourself with when you're being creative? Is it more creative when you're on the porch with your kids, or is it like, hey, I need to, as an author, I'm going to pull away, go into the shed, and I need some privacy? Or do you need constant stimulation? You need rabbits running through the room? What does Sam Smith do when he needs to be inspired?
Well, if you looked around the Forge right now, you would say he needs a huge mess in order to function properly. It's not that bad
All
right now.
All creatives do.
It's
You're
so
not
funny.
alone.
It's so true that I like that whole thing about sort of like clean your desk or clean. And I mean, that to me is so psychically liberating to get a clean space. So actually I don't have a lot of stuff in here. It's
clutter.
No, I don't. I can't. And you asked about whether the kids are sort of active participant. I didn't answer it in my 5,000 hour answer that I gave you. I'm going to try to be more, have more brevity here, but they didn't that much. It was my story telling them, and they loved it. It was a gift from me to them. And so it wasn't, I think a lot of people do have that sort of back and forth, or what do you think should happen next? And it wasn't like that. We had a lot of interaction when we were going through like the Bible. And so that was this huge part of like the conversation. But with these stories, I just told them stories and we walked, and they were the audience, and it was like a gift of love. So it was that was, I don't know why that is. They're so creative and they're so brilliant. We definitely could have done it a different way, but that didn't happen. But my space here is really, it's this little garden shed that we sort of fixed up a little bit, and it's small. I have a lot of neck trouble, so I have like a chair, like a recliner sort of a thing that I kind of get in this situation where my back and neck is sort of sustainable position. But I honestly get a lot of art from kids, letters, and so I have a whole cabinet just absolutely teeming with that stuff. And I love it. It's so great. But when I first moved into this office, I started putting that up and it was just everywhere. And so it basically became this sort of museum. And I was like, oh, these kids are, sending me stuff and it's so special and precious. And I got to honor that. My wife's like, this is insane. You gotta do something. So she had this brilliant idea of like taking a picture of all of the art as it comes in, and then making these sort of like chapbook sort of things. So I've got these books, full of art from the kids. It feels like I can display it on a bookshelf, and it's kind of like I can still honor what they're doing without.
Yeah.
I need sort of. I mean, if you look, I'm looking right now at a little. It's funny, a little sort of icon-ish sort of picture that Ned Buster created on a little, I don't know, where they're like, I can't remember what you call it, like a relief sort of a thing where you sort of Lewis and Tolkien. Got little pictures of them. I've got a map of Middle Earth that my brother Will made for me twice, because he made it once with 13 hours and then he stained it and it was too dark and you couldn't see it. So he did the whole thing again, stained it with tea. And it's just exactly like Tolkien's, except it's his handwriting. It's beautiful. I've got a few paintings from friends. My wife, a painting from my wife, from Joe Sutphen, from Jamin Still, from Rembrandt, all my best friends. A quote from C.S. Lewis, a West Virginia seal, a Zulu shield. It's pretty minimal, and I need to need quiet. I do need to get away most of the time because it's so involved, and it's so much like the play I was describing earlier. That's the state I'm trying to get into mentally, is that I'm enjoying it and I'm wondering what's going to happen next. And it's sort of, and then you kind of wake up and think, oh, I was so engrossed.
Yeah.
And the only other
into that world.
the only other experiences I've had that are like that, which is like for someone who struggles with anxiety, or which I have, or just, the whole like, I think Tim Keller has a book about is it the freedom of self-forgetfulness?
That's exactly it.
Yep.
Yeah, freedom of self-forgetfulness.
So I mean, good. I feel like I'm chasing that my whole life, is like, I want to be. So the only other places, like sometimes in worship, there's a time where with myself, I wish it was all the time, where I'm just like forgetting about myself so much and focusing on God's goodness, God's love, His acceptance, His a challenge, whatever. I'm just like kind of forgetting. And then sometimes in sports, playing sports, like you kind of forget for a little bit because you got stuff to do. You're kind of, we got to move the ball or whatever. And it's so fun to just forget about and get lost. And that's when I'm at my best writing, that's what's happening, as I'm forgetting about myself and I'm lost in the world, and it creates something that's I experience sort of first, and then it's shared with the audience, and I hope they have a similar experience.
I have to tell you that I blame Green Ember series for our pet rabbit.
Oh.
So, but we
You're
did not.
welcome.
Is this a bad thing or a good thing?
Well, good thing for my girls. Fine thing for me and my husband. It's a 9-pound Velveteen Lop. Now, we did name it Dobby, so I'm sorry. We gave it a Harry Potter name. But
that's heartbreaking,
would
honestly.
love for you to share more about the Green Ember series, because it is so beloved in our household. For those who haven't met Heather and Pickett Longtreader yet, would love to hear a 30-second pitch about the rabbits and the swords and just this idea that you talk about with news stories that are for old souls. And so I think it would benefit our readers just to hear more about the Green Ember series, and then about that idea of like, these are news stories, but they're like kind of whispering from these old tales that we kind of are all familiar with.
I love the 30-second time limit. That's great. That's a good by you to try to get me to shut up. It's very tough. I was trying to figure out how to describe what the stories are, and I do think that that's what they are. They're new stories with an old soul. They feel like they belong in some ways to an older kind of storytelling. Maybe we were a little bit more certain about virtue. We were a little less impressed with sort of the anti-hero. But there's all kinds of stories that work in a Christian world because we're all so complex. The Bible is so comprehensive about the human experience. You can read all kinds of crazy stories in the Bible, and not all of them are rated G or PG. So but I think the story, it's rabbits. The main series is Heather and Pickett, a brother and a sister who are caught up in sort of this big, they have a sort of a small idyllic life that's interrupted, and it sends them into this sort of calamitous adventure where they find out part of their family was involved in what went wrong with the world and sort of the fall of the golden age, and they have to find sort of their place in the story. And while it's not at all a Christian allegory or anything like that, I think fundamentally it is about sort of faith, hope, and love, in that it's about keeping faith with the sort of the cause, the good cause. And it's about hope in a coming mending, about something there's going to be a putting right. And I'm not the whole, me as a character, I'm not fully responsible for that, but I have a role to play. I'm not the main character, but I'm a character that matters. And what I do is sort of in this big movement. And then it's about sacrificial love, sort of like laying down your life for your friends and for the cause. So I think that's what it's about in a sense. And I think it works I think one thing that's unusual about it is it kind of works for kids, as in they're excited and they're like, oh wow, what a bow and arrow shot, and oh, he saved, and they're just kind of jumping around. But I think for parents, they sort of feel this river beneath it of meaning that the kids don't always catch on the first experience. We've heard 1,000 times at the end of the Green Ember, moms are weeping and kids are leaping, and we've heard that over and over again. The kids are jumping off the couch because they're like, yes, what we did, kind of a blew up the Death Star sort of a moment. But the moms are crying and the kids are like, why are you crying? And they're like, well, you'll understand someday, sort of like what it means, sort of. So I think this works on those two levels, and that was not because I was clever. That was just what happened. Partly maybe because it was a parent and a child experiencing it together in this sort of organic way. So yeah, I was more than 30 seconds. Sorry, Cassie.
No, you're good. It is so good. And it's hard to recap it in 30 seconds. you've described some of your stories as dangerous to the darkness. And I think that's why even the stories from the 80s we're talking about, or pre-80s, Lord of the Rings is older than the 80s, but the stories we grew up with, Lord of the Rings and Narnia and Star Wars, and it's, there's this light and dark. And I think some Christian parents tend to default to like safe narratives that, maybe are more bland or not neutral, but kind of only good because they're nervous about dipping their toes too much into the dark. But I think that you handle it so well. And so would just love to hear you kind of talk about stories that are dangerous to the darkness and the difference between like a safe story and a good one.
Thank you. I do care a lot about this. I actually think that sort of the safe stories that are safe for the whole family, I think are extremely dangerous. I think because they don't, I think what we get with the best stories is a kind of armor against the future, armor for our souls, armor for our hearts. We experience going to Mordor. And when you read a book, you really experience it. So you're experiencing it, it's not just synapses in your brain, your body is experiencing it. You read that together, your husband's doing the Tom Bombadil, you're there. Your kids are you went on a journey together. Like that's what happened. It's so much more than just this sort of brain activity. It's memorable. You remember where we were when we went to Mordor, where we were, it involves so much of our bodies. Lewis talks about that intellect is the organ of truth, but the imagination is the organ of meaning. And maybe we'll be able to get into more of that. I feel like this is that stories are meaning-making machines. But we, even physically, we have this capacity, all of us have these capacities for intellect and for imagination. And when we engage, and stories do both, but we engage those things, it's a physical experience. You're really it's really happening. And I think when you experience Samwise Gamgee or Faramir or Lucy Pevensey, you are getting armor for what is going to come in life, or Edmund, or Eustace with the dragon. Like you remember these things, and they're really powerful. Not just because I learned a lesson. It is bad to deceive or bad to rebel or something. You feel it. Yeah. And for me, the best experience of The Lord of the Rings, why I think it's the best book, the best fiction book that's ever happened, is because for me, my own experience, I've studied theology. I love theology. I love the Bible. I've read hundreds of books on theology and books on discipleship or Christian living sort of stuff, whatever. And some of them have been so transformational, so great. None of them have transformed me spiritually the way that The Lord of the Rings has, because I loved who I ought to love and what I ought to love. And it was like all the other stories, I was like, I could see it. And that's Chesterton's powerful insight about sort of what happens in fairy tales is the apples are golden in fairy tales, so we can remember in the world they're green, and the rivers run with wine in fairy tales, so we can remember in the real world they run with water. As in, like you can experience wonder, you can see something what the best stories, what I hope my stories do, what the best stories for me do, is they show you something that's technically not true, so that you can experience something that is deeply true.
Yeah.
And so that you can actually see the truth. And I feel like the Lord of the Rings is so true. And Tolkien called it a true story, not in that the events actually happened, but that it's so honest about the way God made the world, and it's so faithful to reality with a capital R. So I think that when we just pat kids on the head, when we give them stories that are very simplistic and moralistic, sometimes you need that. Sometimes you need to, like, the kid went into the road and got hit by a car or something, and so don't go into the road. That's fine. And some like church skits or Christian movies, I'm not like, you should do this so your marriage doesn't fall apart. Like, that's fine. I'm saying there is something we can do that's sometimes better than that, or a little bit deeper, the power of stories. I think we can respect the power of stories a little bit in a more profound way, a little more humble way, I would say. And say that it's sometimes when we just tell a story about like, they just read the Bible and then they started winning the championship and everything started going right, or whatever. Like that could work. That's not the end of the world, but there is a danger with that kind of a thing. And there's something about going to Mordor and, or people getting killed or losing something, or you lose your son Absalom in a tree, but getting hung in a tree, or these kinds of stories that they do something for you that you just think, oh, that's if I was writing that story, Absalom would be fine. He would be saved, or he would repent. That would be the Christian version. But the one we got in the Bible is scary and bad and weird. And it's so, and you feel it, but I mean, you feel that experience, and it's like almost like a fantasy, the way that like some of the trees kill more people. That it's so strange. It's like the Ents. But there's something that happens with that in a story that arms a kid, it arms us to experience reality. And I think that's why just going to the meaning thing is like, you can say true things like God is good, or God is powerful, or it's wrong to steal, or whatever, like true things. But when you experience them in a story, you can say Jesus is the Redeemer. Jesus loves the little children. Whatever you want to do, those are good statements. Jesus is one fully God and fully man. True, faithful, catechetical sort of stuff I'm all for all of that. But what are they? They're shorthand for a story, and they take you to a story. And what did God actually give us? And when he gives us this book with so much narrative, it has commands in it for sure. God says, no, don't do this. Yes, do this. This will get you to hell. All kinds of like scary stuff. But it's all in the context of these stories, whether it's the liberation from Egypt, or it's the resurrection. I mean, we have 4 gospels. Why do we have 4 gospels? Does God think that telling us the story, us encountering Jesus in a story, is important?
Yeah.
4 times. If it was just like us, Western thinkers, we'd be like, technically he was born on this date. He did this, then he died. That's not how he told it. So we get this. So when we get the best stories, we don't subtract truth, we add meaning. So the best stories, that's what I want to do, is I don't want to subtract truth. I don't want to lie. And I don't want to lie to kids about what's really out there, which is that it is scary. And you might be martyred. And you don't have to tell a 1-year-old, hey, guess what? You're going to get your head chopped off, someday for Jesus. Like there's different times, but you don't want to never tell a kid about the saints, about the martyrs, the people who have gone before us, the people who right now are being in danger. You want to introduce that. So I think the Satan is real. The enemy is bad. The dragon is real. Like I think so many Christian parents want to say, there's nothing out there that's don't worry, everything's okay. And there's nothing bad. And, oh, you heard a story about a monster? Oh, monsters aren't real. That's a lie. Monsters are 100% real. And the enemy is bad and worse than we can imagine. They wreaked havoc on humankind, and it's not always an external attack, but he is seeking who he can devour. That's what he does. He's a liar and a killer. It always has been, and that's the whole history. And so I just think lying to kids about that. So I would rather my kid encounter Sauron than a little misunderstood, cute little dragon that needs a hug. And everything's fine, and it was just because he was mistreated or something, and so now we got to understand. Like, that's not safe. That's dangerous. I want my kids to be equipped and to have the armor.
Good.
So I hope when the kids finish the Green Ember series that they have an encounter with reality, an encounter with danger that arms them and is a blessing to them, and it doesn't hurt them. Isn't in excess. You have excess like propaganda is excess, pornography is an excess. Gross violence is an excess. You don't need to crank those dials. I want to carefully think about those dials, but I don't want to turn them to 0 just so that we all feel safe.
Right.
I think that's a misuse of my position. I have to love and serve these kids. And that includes giving them an encounter with death scenes, with difficulty, with challenges. And I hope that gives them armor, because I love these kids so much.
Amen.
When we give them a gift.
That's so good.
That's a good word.
Yeah, I think as parents, we're so easily motivated by fear.
Yeah.
And it ends up driving so much of what we do, even like our decisions about what we let our kids read, watch, what we participate in together. And so I think that being reminded that faith, hope, like entering into faith, hope, and love helps us kind of handle the complexities of the world that we're in, but when fear is the primary emotion, then it's like we want to protect and like kind of, and that leads us down a more watered down, kind of version of what God's calling us to, I think. Your new series, I want to talk about it's not a new series so much as your new book. And it's so interesting because it's called The Lost Tales, or it's part of The Lost Tales, Green Ember, The Lost Legend, right?
Yes.
And would love to hear you talk about that new book, but also so interested as to kind of why you keep coming back to this world instead of creating a whole new one. Because we've got the Green Ember series. We have the little kind of books that are in between them. I'm blanking on the names of them right now. And then you're also working on one or have one about Helmer. Is that correct?
Yes.
Who's also part of the world. And so what about the world keeps drawing you in? And then will you share with us about the Lost Tales?
Sure. And I mean, if it's confusing to folks, like the Lost Legend is the 14th Green Ember book, I think. 13th, 14th. 1, 2, 3, 13th. One of those numbers. But that might sound like, oh, no, I don't know what it is so easy to begin the Green Ember. You just begin with the Green Ember. There are a bunch of stories. There are side stories. It's kind of like if you like Star Wars and you like these, you talked about The Mandalorian earlier, like and some of those you might be able to say are pretty big miss, but whatever. We like stories that have this expanded universes, right? And if you love it, you kind of want to keep it. So there's a lot in the Green Ember world, and there's so much more I can do. I love the stories, and there's so much there's a lot more I can tell in that universe that is exciting to me. The main characters are Heather and Pickett. We've talked about them a little bit. They're the main 4 books are the Green Ember, Ember Falls, Ember Rising, and Ember's End. That's kind of the core of the story, and a lot of people that's what they read. And if you love that, then there is a lot more to go. What happens in the Lost Tales trilogy? There's the first one is the Lost Key. The second one that just came out is the Lost Legend, and then later on this year in 2026. The Lost Cause will come out. So that's a little trilogy of these Lost Tales stories. And they happen sort of in between. They're kind of like a parenthetical little story. What happened when they first arrived at this new citadel? What did they do? What happened? What adventures did they get into? So it's the favorite characters sort of coming back. So if you're familiar with the Green Ember at all, you're just like, oh, I loved Heather and Pickett. Well, these are Heather and Pickett stories with Joe, with Helmer. And I love them. They're really fun little stories. It's this sort of conspiracy that's going on inside the citadels, this sort of undermining the work of the cause and the resistance to these lords of prey and these main characters. But I kind of love this idea of, like, they're called Lost Tales because they're supposedly they were sort of lost in this little parenthetical time. But I also love this idea that, and we've been saying this a lot this year, that like get lost in stories that won't get you lost. And that's kind of this idea of like that, what we were talking about earlier about just getting lost in an adventure. You know what that's like to experience it. But I also love that one of the things that we hear a lot from parents is this, we do have a high level of trust, and we take that super seriously, that there's a lot of people that just like, okay, that's from S.T. Smith or that's from Storywarn. You go ahead and read it. It's fine. Even if I don't have time to sort of like preview it, which I'm always like, preview it's great if you can, but sometimes we're busy. So I love that what we're providing is, and I do think because stories are so powerful, I'm not a person that's just like, oh, just imagination's good. Like, imagination is a capacity. It's not a good. It's like the intellect. It will serve God, Satan, self, whatever, or the biggest villains of history were big imaginative people. So I think that it's not enough just to say, just reading is good. I mean, I don't want to live in fear, and I don't want to be like reactionary, like everything's going to get you and the toothpaste is killing you and everything. Like I think we're overdosing on that sort of like fear mindset. It's funny because it's often from folks who are like, talk about how they're not motivated by fear, but like you can't eat anything, or it's just like, do not eat, do not taste, do not touch. It's just a real murderer's row sometimes. But I do think that there's stuff that like it's not great for kids. Like there's some toxic stuff, and it's in there, and there's some real inhospitable, unloving storytelling for kids. And a lot of times kids get kind of hooked in on a series, and then they'll spring some kind of a thing and that's a bummer to me. It's such a bummer.
Same.
But it happens. And I'm just like, I don't think it's okay just to say like, well, if they're reading, that's fine. Or if they have an imagination, that's fine.
Amen.
So I want to be like faithful. And I wouldn't want to be fearful, and I don't want to be didactic all the time. I don't want to be reduce storytelling as a vocation to just a vehicle or utilitarian sort of a thing to get across truth. I think getting across truth is really important, but so I think like you gotta be awake. And I think a lot of stories you read you'll get lost in them and you'll get lost.
Yeah.
That's the result of a lot. And I want to create stories that are hospitable and loving to kids so that they can get lost in these stories without getting lost. So I hope that's my prayer. That's my aim, is to do that with the Lost Tales and with the Green Ember and with all the books I'm working on.
Well, I think you've done that successfully, not just in the mission, but in the quality, Sam. What you've put out there and what you created for families, there's a reason it resonates, and it's not just because there's something sanitized in which somebody can find something familiar from the Bible and parents feel like, oh, here's a safe thing. It's because you find something that emotionally resonates with the human experience and that prepares any human being who would read it for the reality they're in, even as you're reading a story about rabbits with swords and arrows. So you're reading a story in which there's an adventure, and you find yourself kind of like that, almost that third person moment in The Lord of the Rings. If I could go back, we've referenced that a lot today, but where Sam talks to Frodo about whether or not they're in a story. And you can kind of feel that where they're painting a picture for us of like, we all have this version of a story where no matter if we are the best of human beings living the grandest of adventures, we still need a savior. There's still something broken that needs to be fixed. I love the way you describe the mended wood as this kind of future hope, the coming kingdom, the thing that's going to come that is going to undo, or that everything sad will be untrue again. That picture is beautiful, and it's a thread that you weave throughout, and you thread it so well. And I also love today that you connected it kind of theologically for us too, that when we read the Bible, the way the Lord communicates to us is in story. And sometimes Christ communicated in parables so that only those who would be given understanding could understand. Sometimes the Lord offered it to us in, which is a story within a story, right? It's like we're hearing a story about a man telling stories, and we're in that story going, here's our Savior who's sitting down, gathering thousands of people around him, and then he starts to tell stories, and he starts to tell them, teach them lessons, but it wasn't just a rule book. He's inviting them into the story in which they are a minor character and he is the main one, and you've given God a lot of glory through the work you're doing. And I think for the parent who's listening who's going, well, I can't make up stories like this, here's great news. You don't have to. You can go pick up the Green Ember series, or you can check out Story Warren and the stuff they're putting out, or the Rabbit Room and Andrew Peterson. You can there's great content out there in addition to some of the stuff that's been around for a long time. And I would encourage parents, read with your kids, read before your kids, do your best. There's so much out there that it's hard to stay ahead of some kids that are big readers, but I'll tell you, it's worth it to stay what Sam's talking about too. There's a lost story in which we can get lost, and stories do have influence, and that's why it's important to be mindful of what we have our kids read, and why I'm so grateful, Sam, for people like you that are producing the kind of stories that I want my kids to read, I want them to be engaged in, and I think do form them. So, Sam, thanks for the time you gave us today, and thanks for the ministry that you have. It's an incredible gift to us. So thank you for the time on the Family Discipleship Podcast today.
Adam, Finn, and Cassie, and Chelsea, in absentia.
Yeah.
Thank you guys so much. And can I just say, Adam, that like I agree with you about like that sharing the other stories is good, but I bet a lot of these folks who are worried like I can't do that would be surprised by how much their kids, particularly young kids, will eat up any kind of story about when they were a kid. You know, kids just tell me when you played football in high school. They love it. So you might don't underestimate your own capacity to sort of tell a simple story, because mostly what you're giving them is yourself, and you can probably do it. And you can rely on us other guys to help you. But like I'm in the corner of parents who are in that trench.
That's good. As our kids were growing up, and we still do this today, I will do fill in the blank stories where I leave the hardest parts of the story blank, and I will tell them that once upon a time there was and then I point to them. And then I'll say, and its name was, and and I said his problem was he couldn't find and then I point to them, and they are always cracking up, dying laughing. And the story it can never be retold because it's wild and zany and so strange, but it does invite them into using their imaginations with me, and it's sweet family memories. You know, some of those have been incredible. So I love that the Green Ember has its kind of beginning. The spark of the story starts on the porch, and now it's made its all the way to the forge where you're working away even today. So I'm grateful for that as well. In fact, listeners, on our next episode, we're going to start talking about some of these different parenting styles, some of which we've talked about today. So we're going to do a series on parenting styles. including ones where we're talking about getting everything out of the way of your kid that might do them harm and what harm that might cause, which is a little bit of what we've talked about today. So I hope you'll tune in for that. Now, listeners, if you think it's as important as we do to disciple our families, help us out by giving us a great review wherever you listen to podcasts. Visit one of our sponsors, share this episode with one of your friends. And if you want to keep up with us or join the conversation, you can find us at familydiscipleship.com or follow the Family Discipleship Podcast on Instagram and Facebook. Episodes, don't forget, they come out every other Monday. That means we'll talk to you again very soon.